Welcome to Moving in Stasis. Together with Design Academy and Gallery 3 by You, 60 master graduate students from Design Academy from 2020 are exhibiting their graduation works at Het Nieuw Instituut in Rotterdam. Due to the pandemic, these works have been in storage until this moment, waiting to go on display. My name is Charlie Bleudel. I'm one of the graduate students and I'm part of the curatorial team. And today I'm joined by Guus Beumer, director of the Nieuw Instituut, to take a little tour through the graduation show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Charlie.
As you know, Moving in Stasis is a hybrid. It's both a digital exhibition and a public program. In a sense, we are acting out a backward exhibition. It is an exhibition of its own making. It is a place of production, a place of performativity, a place of politics, and a place, of course, of people. Moving in Stasis has been taking place in 3 acts. Firstly, the installation. Secondly, the production. And thirdly, the public program, which is being live streamed right now from Gallery 3 at the Nieuw Instituut in Rotterdam. This exhibition has been a huge collaborative effort of basically all of the 60 participants of the exhibition. We started it off with the reflection of our current conditions of working. Typically, you produce a work in a place that is yours, your studio, your workshop, to show it in a place that is for everybody, the exhibition, the museum. Now, as everybody is elsewhere but in physical space, we move into this space to use it as ours and produce our work. This exhibition reflects on the making of exhibitions in pandemic times, which have forced the representational aspect of exhibitions to shift away from a physical space of a gallery and into the digital space of an online gallery. Which means the idea of a physical exhibition space has become a mere storage or a set or an infrastructure. Okay, the first work we're going to see is by Megan. Hi Megan.
Hi Megan.
Do you want to tell us about your work?
Yeah, so my project is this body of work. It's the graduation project from Design Academy. And I was really interested in repetition and how by performing these acts of repetition it could be an act of sabotage of time. So I call what I do non-productive productivity, and it's really inspired by the factory workers who would throw a part into the machine in order to sort of gain time back for themselves. And in a way I'm trying to gain time from the rigors of productivity through being overly productive.
Hey, and why do you consider repetition as sabotage?
I think for me repetition is a way that I can occupy time, so repetition is my tool, I would say.
And then you turn that into an act of sabotage.
Yeah, so the continual, because repetition, if you do it on a small scale, you can have the repetition of brushing your teeth. Every day you brush your teeth, it's a repetition. But when you sort of extend a repetition over a lot of repetition over a longer period of time, it becomes kind of absurd. So when you repeat a word so many times it loses its meaning. That's kind of the way I think about it. So if I did this much repetition of this knit, it would be okay, cool. But when you see it on such a large scale, suddenly you have an opportunity to give meaning to it where it maybe wasn't before.
So the next project we're gonna see is Bianca's Bump Galaxy. But first of all, we're gonna see a trailer of the project.
So we're stepping from this physical exhibition into a different realm.
Absolutely.
2020 has been a strange year. The uncertainty that's come with it, amplifying feelings of stress, anxiety, depression, loneliness. While in quarantine, I built Bump Galaxy, a virtual world and community for mental health. In it, players can visit several different care commons, a forest for breathing meditations, sand dunes where you can reflect on your dreams, a snowfield and underwater temple designed for hypnotic imaginings. In Bump Galaxy, players can meet different mental health professionals from around the world. Imagine a joint therapy session with a relationship counselor from Sweden and a hypnotherapist in Japan. Imagine participating in a collective sound bath in the rainforest by one of your favorite DJs. My name is Bianca Carage. I'm a social designer and natural healer. As someone who does energy work and guided meditations, I've always wanted to work with a psychotherapist to give clients the care I wasn't qualified to provide. What if different health professionals collaborated, supplementing conventional methods with alternative therapies to provide more personalized, holistic healthcare experiences in a game world that actually meets the level of intimacy many of us crave that conventional telehealth platforms lack? So what does it mean to bump into each other, actually? To gently collide in surprising and meaningful ways pregnant with possibility? Let's build a world where caring for each other means playing together, because we are living in a game world, one in which we can modify the code if we like.
Hi Bianca, we've just seen your trailer. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your project?
Yeah, sure. So obviously you've seen the trailer. It's this virtual world for mental health care that over the course of the pandemic, I prototyped in Minecraft. When you think virtual therapy, teletherapy, you think about video calls, phone calls,
Yes.
because that was what it was existing. But then I think there's so much possibility to do that inside a game. What we designed, I say we because I developed it not by myself, but really it was about designing the environment, modifying the mechanics and the landscape to facilitate therapy in such a way that we're not just talking about our problems and like our problems and thoughts and stuff, but we're actually we want to actually help people or provide these real new physiological experiences of safety and social support through play. For example, over the course of confinement, met several care practitioners who were telling me, actually it doesn't make sense for us to pay rent for our physical clinics anymore because we can't see our clients face to face. And I'd be like, oh, well, I have this Minecraft server, maybe you want to come see it and let's see how your practice can be possible in this space. And so from there, we took a very collaborative and participatory approach. I wasn't really inviting them to co-work with me. I was essentially inviting them to play with me because, the context of Minecraft is,
It's play and not work.
It's play.
Yeah. I have read that you were next to a designer also a natural healer.
Right.
And I thought, okay, the notion of natural healer, for me at least, could be read as somebody who is also questioning certain forms of classifications and certain notions of authority or...
I realized throughout working on this that my role in virtual care wasn't as a healer per se, but just as a mediator between other practitioners with each other or player and
that's
practitioner.
interesting.
And
okay, so through the act of understanding the potential of the game, you also transformed not only through the toolbox which suddenly became available, but also by introducing a space in which you became fundamentally a mediator and not a designer nor a healer.
And sometimes care receiver. Yesterday, early this morning, I did a workshop with these two drama therapists in New York. In the workshop, of course, I built the space, but it was really for them to bring their practice to life in this virtual space. So we did a demo because we wanted people to see how game world drama therapy works. So we did a demo, and for me, I'm very comfortable just being the client, let's say. And so from healer to player/mediator to even the care receiver.
In our first little conversation we had together, you mentioned the notion of vulnerability, and I thought, vulnerability also, presupposes something, which is definitely, you could say, ingrained into your project. I'm not sure if it's also ingrained in the representation of your project.
Yeah, not really. There's a sense of it in the sense that for some people, at least that I've spoken to, being represented as an avatar instead of a real person, both allows them to be more vulnerable because they're more comfortable maybe not being seen. But allows them to be more vulnerable by removing that vulnerability.
Thank you very much.
So the next work that we're seeing is Pete's work. Do you want to give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, certainly. So the work itself is called The Boring Event in Between. It really started off as when I was in Eindhoven, particularly. Coming to Eindhoven, a city of innovation, going to DAE, but also learning about Dutch design beforehand, before coming to Netherlands, and then walking past all the windows of people's houses and never really see the Dutch design that I come to know as Dutch design. All you see is really sort of cheap IKEA furnitures and stuff like that, which I find it quite fascinating on its own. Like sort of the idea of Dutch design really doesn't really trickle down to the sort of democraticness of it. And then that got me into sort of a series of investigation about why that is. And then with Eindhoven being the base as well, it's a very expat culture, it's a very expat city, where I guess IKEA furniture becomes a quick solution for a lot of the things. And that got me really thinking about sort of, because obviously I'm very interested in objects and how they're being classified, collected, but also re-represented. And in a lot of ways how they also, we were talking about sort of museum being a place that makes meaning. And to me, it does that, it makes meaning, but at the same time it changes the way that we also engage the world as well. So for I being a person who grew up in Hong Kong, lived in Vancouver, moved to Netherlands, have lived through many different cultures, and going to a museum, I would never be able to find something that sort of fit. So therefore, I sort of always wonder if there's a way sort of to capture this very transient, very nomadic style of life. And then sort of IKEA come back to me in the sense that they were
Haunted you.
Exactly, they were sort of designed to be universal to begin with. It has its own problematic, but let's not talk about that. But in a very roundabout way, they also come to represent this very transient way of living, a very fluid way of living. So this project is the project that is sort of presented here. Is a series of photographs of IKEA objects staged in their sort of non-performative stage in a domestic environment usually, or at IKEA of course. The material that I use to sort of build the sculptures are also from second-hand marketplace. So I sort of go around Eindhoven and collect different sort of IKEA furniture from people. While I do that, I also usually collect their stories as well. So I have sort of 20 to 30 pages of the story that I don't actually use. And they sort of slowly build up this archive of a very transient life. And the idea to sort of re-represent these images in an archival crate is also to sort of, I guess, questions or use it as a probe, use it as an instrument to questions whether you can properly archive them, because of course you can't. That's the thing. Once you put them into an archive, you put a frame around it, and that loses the meaning of the transientness anymore. And which is why the decision of not showing the physical object, but just the image of the object, is very important.
And why is it important?
It's important to not necessarily actually archive them, but more like, I guess, it's the question of archiving itself. I think earlier we were talking about ownership. So it's the same thing as about if you cannot never own something, then it's about shifting the idea of ownership to more of a relations. So I wonder if archiving is also the same thing. In the case of IKEA, for example, I wonder, if in museums we have seen multiple exhibitions about IKEA. For sure, it's always celebrate the designers who design the objects, less about the people that uses them. But in my case, I wonder if the resilience of people who move around and uses these objects, it's through the usage of the object themselves that actually give the meaning, not necessarily the designers. So I wonder if that could be celebrated in some way.
Next to the fact that it's definitely almost a kind of a celebration of transient life through IKEA, it's also an attempt to think about how you can archive transient life. But you do that through a very particular act, because it's of course not the IKEA object as a whole which you're presenting, but you're presenting, you could say, the elements through which IKEA builds up its objects, and then you and the act of design is in repurposing them and turning them into, you could say, abstract manifestations of IKEA ingredients.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Pete. Okay, Francois, first I have to congratulate you with the fact that you got your exam.
Thank you. It's never too late.
I understand the video is a little bit somewhere else, and I'm not sure, but in the introduction people said to me that this was in a way a continuation of your project. Could you tell me more about it?
Yeah. Two things, or a few reasons why you continue my project. And as I explained, maybe I can unpack slowly. here we are in this exhibition called Moving in Stasis, which was organized by basically all of us, or some of us. And the concept was to kind of revisit, reopen our initial graduation project from last year, and also finishing by the beginning, basically the last days, which we are now at the opening of the show. And I was very inspired by that. I felt, wow, that's cool, like taking something backwards as a kind of a new beginning again. So I took the opportunity to kind of revisit my graduation project. And so I'm just opening this object, and I can explain what they are soon. Yes.
So in fact, this has also become a re-exhibition or something
Yes,
for you.
for me, yes.
Yeah.
I should explain maybe briefly what my graduation project was about, and to explain what this project is. So my graduation project was basically about the life of object, the spirit of object. It was an animation movie where I decided to basically use objects as actors, to animate movies, to bring them to life, literally use animation as a medium of almost animism. But the basic premise was to understand how objects, things have gained consciousness or agency. And as a student, I struggled a lot to understand that, to study that. And I thought, oh wow, what if I do that through kind of what I know, the history of making, and looking at objects, understanding how objects are made, and how in the process of being made, they gain their own consciousness, agency, spirit. On the day we made molds, we basically starting to have tools to give shape to an abstract thought.
Yeah.
And basically molds were kind of like the first step, or huge step in cognition, in consciousness, in giving shape to abstraction. And from the day we made molds, we also use an object to make objects, and more objects to make objects, to make objects, to make objects, etc. And from that day, basically objects became more and more complex, technical, but also escaped us, and entered this kind of like parallel world, parallel universe, with their own consciousness, not fully belonging to us. That's kind of the story of the movie. Of course, it sounds a little abstract, but the movie is very playful. The movie is a real story.
Yeah. To me, it's very interesting that, of course, the story of meaning
Yes.
is for you very much related to the story of making.
For me, yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
Because when we make objects, of course we make things, but we create meaning, but we also try to access an invisible world, but actually by making physical, tangible things, we're also trying to unravel the intangible, the invisible. This is what I've always tried to explore, to express.
Yeah,
because
that.
I was haunted or revisited by migration project, and the exhibition here kind of prompted this, and I was saying, oh wow, I was kind of thinking of the main character of my story, my movie, the mold, and I was, what if I do something about it? What if I make a mold, or a series of molds, more like, we see the idea of a mold, but also the mold of an idea, quite literally. So this is what I did. That is more like an exercise. No, I don't know if I answer your question, but this is how I arrived here, and this is what I'm showing today. Now, I don't know again if I answer your question properly, but
No, but it at least to me it has a kind of intrinsic logic, you know.
Yes.
The moment you accept the fact that that you need to build up a type of relationship between you and your tools, you could say, then of course the idea of the tools becomes quite fundamental, I would say. Yeah?
Indeed, yes, very much so. And but also, I think for me it's also like, in some way also expanding on what we have discussed actually together as a group. Charlie there, 2 years ago? No, I forgot, like a while ago. But it was a great project where we basically thought of different ways of contextualizing or expanding the idea of objects or product. Remember we had this idea of product as basically here it's product, it's the final thing defined, and we have a prototype, which is conceiving, exploring something which we can define. On the idea, I would say, of probe as well, which is actually an object, an instrument to conceive of something which we don't know about. And it was nice. It was in the concept mostly of post-humanism and Neuhaus, trying to basically find tools to appreciate, measure the non-human or more than human element. And for me, it was in some ways it was great, but it was not exactly where I was, and still not where I am. However, it helped me to think about it, and I feel like this object, like these molds, are not project, prototype, or are not product or prototype or probe. They are actually what I would call project almost. They help me to project, to express something else. And this, for me, this is what objects do. They can actually express, they project the invisible from the visible, or vice versa. They absorb the invisible in the visible.
In a way, I'm touched by your exercise. And the fact that, as you say, you wanted to go back to the act of making,
Yes.
and you could say also a kind of revalidation of the tools which were once available in order to make. Yeah? And then you came in, at this very moment that the unique turned into the industrial, you could say, or through at least to an idea of production through the mold, and that created this strange little, you could say, problematic distance, but also metaphysical distance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And this you wanted to address much more than the fact that, or at least through making, instead of through thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's beautiful.
So we've seen only a small snippet of the exhibition, but still quite a lot.
God.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, I feel totally honored. I mean, you already made sure that I became curious by transforming from the what to the how, and then telling me that you used this period to rethink what you already had thought about. So I was already a little bit, what am I going to say? But I'm totally bedazzled. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.